Salidas. I have written about 5 different book series over the last 10 years. I write in the supernatural fantasy genre, which is really big genre-wise. And I also write for First Comics News, and I have a weekly podcast web show called Spilling Ink. So today we're going to talk about from the idea to first draft stage. For those of you who were already here the past couple weeks, we started with the building blocks. We talked about character creation, then we talked about world building. So today we're kind of putting it all together and getting through that hard first draft stage, which is probably the most crucial stage of writing. Some would argue that editing is the most crucial, and I would say to that, if you don't have something to edit, you can't edit it. So we got to get it written on paper first. Welcome, guys. Let's see if one thing will work today. All right, let's talk about what is not writing. All right, a lot of us procrastinators like to use these things. We think about stories. We think about what it's going to be like to write our book. We buy lots of books on writing and writing craft. We talk about writing our books, and I would say this, don't talk about your story if you're not actively writing it, because there's a little disconnect sometimes that happens. When you talk about your idea before you start to write it, your brain goes, it's already gone. We don't need to do it anymore, and then you don't write it. So don't talk about your story unless you're actively writing it and maybe discussing it with somebody on a soundboarding type basis. Here's the ideas I'm working on. Does this sound good? Don't talk about writing before you actually write. Listening to podcasts about writing. I do Spilling Ink every week, where we talk about writing and authors' journeys and all that fun stuff, but that doesn't help you actually write the book. Attending writing conferences. We all love going to those, but again, as good as that information is, it's not writing our book. Dream about writing. We all want to be writers. Lots of people want to be writers. The difference between wannabe writers and writers is writing. You got to write it down. We watch movies about writing, and sometimes we talk to our cats about writing. I think of that a lot. None of these things will write your book for you. You have to actually sit your butt in the chair and write your story. I know it doesn't sound like that's as easy as it should be, but really that's it. You have to sit down. You have to write your story. No one's going to put that story on paper but you, so you've got to do it. Now, there are 2 different types of writers. We mentioned this before. There are 2 different types, plotters and pantsers. The plotters are the ones who have those wonderful, beautiful outlines ahead of time, and more power to them. I wish I was one of them, but I'm not. We also have pantsers. Both of these writers are okay, and the 50 Shades of Grey in between of those types of writers is okay. You can be somebody who doesn't want a hard outline ahead of time, who wants to just give your characters, like I do, a to-do list. I want you to do these certain things before you hit the end of the story. That's okay. You can be somebody who writes a synopsis of your story ahead of time and uses that as your plot. Or you can be somebody who sits down and stares at the blank screen and says, I'm just going to write today. It's all okay. Now, let's look at the difference between plotters and pantsers so you can get a better understanding of the struggles each one goes through. So for plotters, they have a less chance of writer's block because they've already written the story out. They've already outlined what they want to write, what the characters are going to do. And that makes the writing process, when you get to it, a bit easier. You're not running into that wall of, I don't know what happens next, because you've already written it down. That also allows you to set up all of the, oh my God moments, the moments that you know that your reader's going to be so excited and so glued to the page for. It allows you to, like I said before, write faster. You know what's going to be on the page, so you can write it a lot faster. Of course, it's not all good. Sometimes this leads to boredom. If you already know what's going to happen, remember that disconnect I told you about that happens when you get the idea out of your head? It's already written, why should I do it? Why do I want to write it now? I've already written it. It may not be book form, but I've already written the idea. That can happen. And then you've got to reignite that spark of creativity. Sometimes, like me, this is why I can't be a plotter, you feel trapped. You've written exactly what your character should do, and you get to a point in the story where your character doesn't want to do it. Or it doesn't make sense for the character to do it. And now you've hit the wall. You've got writer's block. You can't figure out how to get past this problem. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in one of our problems with first drafts. Pantsers, on the other hand, they get to write by the seat of their pants. They get to experience the creativity as it happens, the story organically as it comes to them. It's very inspirational. It makes you feel really good. It's kind of like when you're watching a movie for the first time or reading a book for the first time and you're experiencing this whole world as it's happening. For the writer, that's very much the same. You're experiencing this world that you not only get to play God in, but you get to see all the twists and turns happen and how they develop, which is very exciting. It allows you to go with the flow. You don't have an outline, so you can swerve to the left and change what you wanted to do, or you can maybe take a different path that your characters weren't supposed to take, which is fun. You get to discover more about your character. You get to discover more about your world as the story flows. Remember I said in last week's world building, and even in character creation, I keep an extra Word document open while I write. And as I'm writing my scenes, pertinent information about characters and about world building, I put off into that other document so I can refer to it later. That becomes your character binder. That becomes your world rule book. So as you're writing this story and discovering it, you're also building that same rule book that you need to maintain the continuity of your story. And as you go back in revisions, you refer to that rule book and you make sure characters are acting as they're supposed to. The world is as it should be. Things are happening the way they're supposed to. Or if not, now you can pinpoint where you went wrong and fix it. Now, on the negative side, writers who are pantsers get hit the hardest with writer's block. Because as you're experiencing that story, sometimes you run smack into the brick wall and you don't know how to fix it. And this happens a lot. I'm actually at that stage right now with the story that I'm writing. I know what the characters should be doing, but I don't know how to get them to do it. And that's really frustrating. Now, if I was an outliner, I would have already had step by step, how am I going to get out of this problem? But I'm not. I'm a pantser. So I have to sit and figure it out, or go back a chapter and read what I did and say, could I take a different choice and get forward? Or there's another option. Sometimes you just jump over that brick wall, put a pin in it, write what's supposed to happen after, and come back later and figure out how to fix it. That's okay. You end up with messy first drafts as a plotter, or excuse me, as a pantser. And yeah, my first drafts are hot messes. In fact, I'm the one who, I think I coined the phrase skeleton draft because that's what mine look like. I end up, typically, when I write a story, that first draft looks like a screenplay. It's almost all dialogue, very little action, very little character, body language, looks, any of it. It's just what I hear the characters saying. That's okay. You're going to go back and revise it. That's what revisions are for. But that's how I get through the first draft phase. And you'll figure out what works for you. It's okay to have that skeleton draft. It's okay to have the messy first draft. Because like we said in the beginning, you can't edit something that's not written. So if you have that messy first draft, you've got something to work with. Better than nothing at all, right? Sometimes you might not finish the draft. And when you run smack into that brick wall of writer's block, sometimes you can't figure out how to get out of it. And in some cases, for a lot of pantsers, that's it. They can't figure it out. They won't write. So don't be that person. We're going to talk about a couple of problems with first drafts that we can overcome. That one you definitely have to work through. You can reach out to other writers, are great resources. Use them as sounding boards. You can reach out to people who read within your genre. Use them as sounding boards and go, okay, here's where I got to. What do you think? Was this smart? Was this the way you would have seen the world going? And sometimes you can bounce ideas around each other to get through that and finish the novel. Here we go. All right, so we've got to figure out our story. Remember we talked about the building blocks before. We need our world building, we need our characters, we also need our plot. All of these together is what creates our story. So we start with the idea seed. What gave us the inspiration to write? That's usually the best jumping off point. Plotter or pantser, you've got an idea and you want to write it down. So you start writing. Then we have to move into our characters. We talked about learning about our characters, using character archetypes to build on the personalities for the people in your story. We use our characters to interact within the world that we're creating. We throw conflict at our characters to challenge them, to motivate them, to get them to grow and create our character's arc. So know who your characters are. And again, if you're a pantser, go ahead and just start writing, but keep that notebook open on the side and write the details in about the characters as you're writing them. So you can refer later. That becomes your character's Bible. You want to make sure that you know all about your characters. Remember the rule book. We need to know every bit about our characters. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What motivates them? What gets them out of bed in the morning? What is their goal for this story, and how do they plan to achieve it? The more you know about your characters, the better you're going to write them, the more realistic you're going to write them. You're going to make them feel real for your readers because they become real. And in those instances where we're writing our story and our characters decide not to follow what we want to do, that's because they become so real. No, I'm not going to go into that pit of despair. You're not going to make me. And then we have to figure out, well, either we're going to get them in there or we're going to have to go around it. So know your characters. Also know your world. These are the building blocks we've talked about before. Your characters live in this world. So what do you know about it? What does this world look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What do the plants taste like? What are the animals like? You have to know every bit about your world if your characters are going to interact within the world. Then, of course, we come to plot. Now, plot is a very broad term. Plot sometimes gets mixed up with theme as far as what it actually means. Plot is the series of events of action points in your story. We call them plot points because these are the points of the different action we're throwing at our characters. And it's graphed, typically like you see with the roller coaster there. There's two different graphs that are most commonly used right now. There is Freytag's pyramid, which is your standard 3-act structure. So you start at the beginning, introducing your story. Then we have all of our rising action. We hit a climax, which is not the big fight of the story, it's the most tense point of the story. A lot of people get that confused. It's not our main fight with the villain. This is this character going to win moment? We don't know. And that is the most tense, the most exciting point. Then we have our falling action, and that's usually where the characters figure out how they're going to beat the bad guy. And then we hit the resolution. Now, the Freytag's pyramid is the standard that everybody uses for three-act structure. There's also another one called the Fichtean curve, which starts a little bit quicker. It kind of starts right in the action. I don't know if you've ever heard the term in medias res. Start in the middle of things. Which one?
The word.
Fichtean curve?
Nope.
Or in medias res?
Nope.
Nope. Freytag's pyramid? Nope. Okay. When you think about it, let me know. All right, so in medias res is a term called in the middle of things, where you start your action right where it begins, rather than starting with your introduction of scene and introduction of characters. In most modern books and films today, people have such a short attention span, they kind of want that instant action, and that tends to be what draws people in. In my Agents of Asset series, the one that I just started releasing, one of the biggest criticisms that I get in that story is the beginning is slow. I had to start it that way because of the world building, because I needed to show the contrast between normal world and the magical world. There was no way for me to start it right smack in the middle of the action, because the character doesn't know this. The character has to be trained, has to see what's happening, and has to see the disconnect between what she's used to seeing and what's happening right in front of her. And I don't get bad reviews on that book, but almost every review I've seen has said, I love this book, but it took me forever to get into because I had the long intro, the world building. And it's not to say that you can't do the same thing. You can have the longer intro. It just seems like people today like the faster, more immediate jump into action. Yes?
What was that third one that you said? Freytag's pyramid, Fichtean curve, and...
In medias res.
Okay.
Yes, and that's it, in the middle of things is what it translates to.
Okay.
And that's just jumping right into the action, jumping at the middle point rather than starting at the beginning. So there are different ways that we can structure our plots, but basically they all do follow that same thing. You have to introduce your characters, you have to give your characters action, you have to throw something at them that challenges them, and then you have to come to a climax. You have to create that point of ultimate tension and then figure out how we solve our problem before we get to the end. No matter what book you write, they all have that basic structure to them. Now, when we talk about plot is creating those conflict points. You might remember this one from the character seminar we talked about. There are different types of conflict that you throw at your characters. It's not always a big giant battle. Sometimes it's a small thing, and these points of conflict through our rising action are how we create that interest. We create whether or not the character is real to the reader. How do they overcome challenges? We talked about before with technology. It's not always about the Terminator's coming after us. Sometimes our iPhone didn't work, we didn't get an important email, and that caused a problem. Little points or big points, we want to throw conflict at our characters in different points throughout the story. This is how we build it. Plot is the setting and the characters all tied together through the conflict you throw at them. And you're going to throw multiples of these. You don't just throw one at a time. Sometimes you throw 2 or 3, or you have a broad point of conflict, like a person versus society, but you also have little points of conflict. Look at Hunger Games. Person versus society, very broad theme. Person versus nature, surviving in the arena. Person versus self, the battles between the kids that are fighting for their lives. You get multiple points of conflict throughout the story in different layers. And that's what helps to create those interest points for your reader. Everybody got this one?
No, not yet.
Okay. Now, if you were here for the character one, that is also in our character sheet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you're still good. A lot of this stuff builds upon what we've already learned. So if you've been here before, you've seen some of this already. All right, so now how do we structure this for a story? Let's look at the hero's journey. This is the very classic storyline. This is our Star Wars. This is our Hobbit storyline, our Lion King storyline. We start with the exposition. That's your intro, right? We've got a character who's got a boring life. They're in a boring existence. They need some challenge in their life. That's how we start. That's that slow start that readers today aren't really interested in. But we're showing the normal way of life, because the twist is we're going to remove them out of this normal way of life. And that's where we start with our rising action. We have our mentor character, our Gandalf, who comes in and he says, you need to go on this quest. Obi-Wan Kenobi, you have to go on this quest. There's always a mentor that takes us on the journey. They may not finish the journey. Remember from our character archetypes, mentors don't always make it to the end, but they start us on our journey. So there's our rising action. Now our rising action is multiple points of action going all the way up to the top. Then we have our climax. We have our character learning something about themselves. They can use the Force now. They're strong enough to overcome what they need to overcome in order to defeat the villain. So as we hit our falling action, we become a true hero. We've defeated the villain. We hit our resolution. We return home changed. This is how the standard story structure works with one of our most common themes when it comes to storycraft, the hero's journey. Now, I said before, plot is the action points that hit every reader as they're reading the character. It makes them more interested, more invested, more excited. It's the emotions that are evoked because of these actions that make the reader take the journey. That's the story. It's all of it thrown together. The reader wanting to take that journey. That's what creates the story. Good. Now again, if anybody has questions, please ask. I like an interactive audience, so you don't have to wait till the end. You can always ask right in the middle. Now, 2 different types of stories you might hear over and over and over again are the plot or the character-driven stories. And I would argue that you shouldn't worry at this point about whether or not your story fits into plot-driven or character-driven, because all of the good stories have the elements of both of them. But to define them for you, a plot-driven story is one that focuses on the actions the character is making, not the reason. You have a lot of quick actions that the character is just kind of forced to make. Less about character development, more about, are they going to get through this? And that makes it exciting because you're constantly in a state of what's going to happen next. The character-driven stories focus more on how and why the character made the action. It's more introspective. It pushes characters beyond their comfort zone in order to get them to grow. Now, this can also be looked at as literary fiction versus genre fiction. Now, again, don't pay attention to these so much as you're writing your first draft, because these ones are sticky terms that people like to throw around to negate the value of a book, I think. Because literary fiction gets all the holier-than-thou, hoity-toity, it's so wonderful, whereas plot-driven is looked at as more commercial drivel. It's not as important because it's all action-packed. Honestly, good stories have elements of both in them. So don't worry so much about these terms. Yes, one is labeled literary fiction versus the other, but literary fiction is just more about making everything really pretty as you dive into the character. And you don't have to do that. If you've got a really good story and you've put a lot of good character development into that story, you can be elements of both. And you don't have to label yourself one or the other. Good example of that, we talk about Tolkien a lot in this series because I love Tolkien. But he is the granddaddy of them all. He is the best resource when it comes to looking at these kinds of things. Is The Hobbit a character-driven or a plot-driven story? Some argue on the surface it's plot-driven. So Bilbo is hired as a burglar. He is going to join forces with the dwarves to reclaim the kingdom of Erebor. There's lots of action, there's lots of monsters, there's lots of danger. You would think, yep, plot-driven, right? Why did he go in the first place? How many people have read The Hobbit? Or watched the movies? Watching the movies counts too. Why did Bilbo go? It wasn't necessarily for the riches. It was Gandalf, the mentor, who pushed him on the journey. Because Gandalf recognized that the Hobbit had grown too comfortable in his life. He no longer had that youthful spirit. He needed to reclaim his adventurous spirit. He needed to reclaim his courage. And going on the journey allowed him to do this. So if you look at it from that standpoint, you could say this is a character-driven story. I say both. And that's why the best stories have both elements. You have action, you have adventure, but you also have the character's reasons for doing things, the why, the growth arc. You make the character feel very real to the reader, and they're going to follow them on this journey. So make sure when you're writing, don't focus on whether or not you are one or the other. Make sure that you are really developing your world. You are developing the characters within the world, because that's what's going to make yours a really good story. So get that character Bible out. If you're a pantser, write as you go. If you're a plotter, make sure you interview your characters ahead of time. Know your character, know everything about them, so you can make them feel real. And so when they make an action, there's a reason behind that action. So we're going to do a little exercise here. Participation is required. We're going to, in our notebooks, take the next 5 minutes. We're going to write a little story. And this is a story that I want you to share in class. I can see the eyeballs going, what? If you walked out of this room right now, and there was a dragon sitting where your car is, what would you do? We're going to take 5 minutes. Give you a couple of little ideas to jumpstart you. Now, I'm not one who likes writing prompts, but I find that they do help spark some of that curiosity, some of that creativity. And remember, like I said last week, if you were here, asking questions is the way that you can build your world and your characters, because you're going to come up with the answers for them.
I don't get, where is the dragon? Does it suddenly replace the car, or where is it sitting in its place?
That's what you write. You tell me. I'm going to put 5 minutes on the timer. I want to see how much you guys can write. favorites.
I love that.
I have a friend on Facebook who randomly sends me these memes to motivate me, and she'll get on a chain of them too. She probably has 100 or more of them, and she'll send me different themed ones every so often. So we have the Tolkien ones, we have the Doctor Who ones, and it's funny. It helps though. All right, time's up. So how did we do? Was everyone able to fill a full page of writing? Okay. Anybody do more than a full page? All right, all right. Now, let me ask you a question. Would you have been able to write more if I had told you you were not going to be sharing this with the class? Would that have changed the way that you thought about writing your story? No?
Yeah.
Surprise me.
No,
Most
say
people
yes.
are stopped by
Yes.
fear. Yes. Fear is the first thing that stops everyone from actually completing their story. The fear of whether or not somebody's going to like it. The fear of whether or not they have enough talent for it. Fear prevents us from reaching our full potential. It's that little demon in our head that whispers, "You're not good enough." And it's something that you're going to have to deal with. I can't even say get over it, because you won't. No matter how many books you write, no matter how long you've been in the business, you will have fear every single time you write and release a book. So you have to learn how to deal with it rather than just getting over it. The biggest fear is a fear that we don't have enough talent for it. Well, you don't know until you try, right? You think, oh, I'm not talented enough, I can't write this. How do you know? Have you tried? The fear means nothing if you're not actively trying to do something. What about everyone's going to hate this. They're going to think the story that I'm writing is ridiculous. Well, there's a lot of ridiculous stories out there. A lot of people who like those stories. So that's really not an argument either. You've got to try. You've got to get over it. Writing is very uncomfortable. It is sharing your imagination, parts of you that you kind of keep hidden with the world. And whether or not it's your story you're writing or a fantasy world you've created, there is a lot of you infused into it. scary to share with other people. You've got to get over that. The best way to do it is to write for yourself first. Don't write thinking other people are going to read it. Write because you want to. Write the story that's inside you because you want to read it yourself. Then you'll be able to not get over the fear, but you'll be able to work with the fear and not have it prevent you from doing what you need to do. Remember, I said that there are stories out there that people have written that are absolutely ridiculous that people like. If somebody can make money writing about sharks in a tornado, your story idea is not that ridiculous. So don't fear it. Write it. Now, feedback is the other fear that tends to stop us. We're worried about what people are going to think about our story. And that demon loves to play with that idea. So if somebody gives you bad feedback, the little demon's whispering in your head, oh, it's completely true. You're the worst writer ever. Don't ever write another word. It's horrible. You're horrible. That's it. You're done. It's not always that way. Bad feedback can sometimes be good. Sometimes bad feedback allows us to see things that we can change, things that we can improve upon. So don't look at bad feedback as you are the worst writer in history. Same thing with good feedback. Sometimes we get good feedback and we're thinking, oh, they're just flattering me. They're not going to tell me my work is bad. They want to tell me I'm good because of whatever reason, whatever they want out of you later. A lot of times when you have reader reviews, the tit-for-tat reviews, where one author will read another author's story, post a review, never do that. Because there is that element of, well, if I wrote a bad review for them, they're going to write a bad review for me, so don't ever even get into that. When you go to get feedback from people, go to people who are going to provide good feedback to you. Writers groups, other writers, people who read within your genre, those are the best people to use. Mom and dad are going to love everything you do, so we don't need to go to mom and dad. Husbands, wives, they typically love everything you do, typically, not always. They're not the best ones to review your work. Go to people who are either in the process of writing or who have read extensively within that genre. They're going to provide the best, most honest feedback. No feedback, that is the worst. And I'll tell you, as an author, I hate that. That's the one that gets the demon really going, whispering in your ear, wow, they can't give you feedback because you're really that bad. Again, we can't get over these, we can just work with these fears. They are never going to go away. So what do? Take feedback at face value. Somebody didn't give you feedback, ignore it. Somebody gave you bad feedback, look for the kernel of truth in there. Is there something I can improve on? Is this somebody just being mean? Okay, ignore it. Is it something that is telling me I didn't develop my characters enough? I didn't give reasons for my characters to do a certain action. Okay, well now let me go back and fix that. Is my story not believable because the world isn't believable? I can fix that. I can go back and I can add in more world details. So take it at face value and work with it. Understand that it's not always negative. Understand that there's usually a reason for it. And then, again, bad reviews sometimes, bad feedback can just mean that person's not meant to like your story. I can guarantee you, if you go and look up your favorite book on Amazon or on Goodreads, somebody is going to hate that book as much as you like it. So not every book is for everybody. So don't stress the feedback so much. Learn to try and find the helpful part and move on. You're never going to get over this fear. It's going to happen every single time you put a book out. I don't care how many you do. You will always have these fears. Learn how to work with them. Now, my favorite thing to say, first drafts are supposed to suck. Everybody say this with me. First drafts are supposed to suck. This is how I get through every first draft, because I know that writing that cancer, hot mess first draft is what I'm going to do. That's just my style, that's who I am, that's how I've written 3 books a year for the past 10 years. It works for me. You're going to find the style that works for you. But the best way to get through a first draft is to understand that it is a first draft. It's not perfect. It's not what's going to get published. And if you can't write the first draft, you're never going to get to the revision or editing phase. So you've got to get it on paper. Allow it to suck. Accept that it will suck and move on. Don't worry about the writing quality. Remember I said my first drafts are almost screenplay-like. He said, she said, he said, she said, he said, all the way through. Because I hear the characters before I see them. That's how I write. Don't worry about the voice and the style. All of that extra descriptiveness comes in once you're more familiar with your world. In your first draft, you have an idea of your world. And remember, if you're keeping that Bible alongside, you're developing the world as you go. So you might see more things on the next pass. You might be able to develop a little bit more of the way characters are doing things, the fun descriptions, the better wording after you've written it once. Yes?
Do you recommend finishing the whole first draft before you rewrite any of it?
I do. I absolutely do. And the reason for that, a lot of first authors that I've met will get stuck on, let's say, chapter 5. Oh, I hate chapter 5. I can't get this right. I can't word it right. The characters aren't doing what I like. This sounds stupid. And they never move past chapter 5 because they rewrite it over and over and over, and they can never just get past it. So if you jump ahead, yep, chapter 5 is a hot mess. I know it's going to be able to be fixed later. And you move to chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You finish the story. You get it all out of your head, and then you've got something to fix later. So yeah, I absolutely recommend that. Now, I have a friend who, I don't know how she does it, but she overlaps. It's the way she writes her first drafts. So she'll write chapter 1 one night. The next night she's going to write chapter 2. So she's going to go reread chapter 1, and then she jumps into chapter 2. And she does this piggybacking every single time. I don't know how she does it. But her drafts come out a lot cleaner than mine do. That's her style. You're going to find the style that works for you. But you can't let yourself be stopped by not liking the way you wrote a sentence. Does that make sense? You've got to just get it out there. Don't worry about the structure. Remember, perfect wording, perfect sentence structure, that comes later. Yes?
It doesn't work for me, but I remember finding it interesting. One of my favourite authors, Dean Koontz, says that he writes literally one page at a time, and he'll edit and edit and edit, and it's perfect, and then he writes the next page. And I don't know how he does it like that, but it works for him.
Everybody has their own
Yeah.
style. And yeah, some people, they have to do that in order to make it work, but obviously he's a writer who's put out a lot of books. He's probably developed that style more than starting with it. I'm willing to bet that initially it wasn't that way for him. And you will develop as you write more. Especially if you're a series writer and you write a lot of books within a world you already know, the next book and the next book and the next book tend to come out faster because you're so familiar with it, it's easier for you to write. But yeah, that's probably something he developed, and more power to him. I can't do it that way. I just can't. Now, I do on occasion with my beta readers, I send them small chunks. So let's say I've written chapters 1 through 5. I'll give it to my beta readers and let them read it while I'm working on chapters 5 through 10. And then I'll go back and I'll look at their notes and maybe make a few tweaks before I hit the end, but I won't do a full revision phase. And that, again, I'm in that spot right now. I'm working on book 4, my Agents of Assets series, and I'm at the point where I'm running into the wall and I'm trying to figure out how to get past certain elements that are stopping me from getting to the end. So I'm hopscotching, I'm going from chapter to chapter instead of writing linearly, and it's a hot mess right now. That's okay. I'll get there in the end. That's just how I work, and it's something I've developed. You will find your way of doing it too. Don't worry about those minute details and descriptions. Remember, my first drafts are skeleton drafts. I don't even know what my characters look like half the time in that first draft, but I hear them. That's the detail that I focus on because I know what they're saying. I can write that part first. Now, on the last one here, following an exact outline. For all of you plotters out there, I need you to be flexible. Yes, you're going to write your beautiful outline ahead of time, and you're going to know where the story is going to go. But remember, to avoid hitting writer's block, to avoid going where your characters go off in a different direction, you have to be a little flexible and allow yourself to go off book occasionally. That's going to be a way to help you when you run into issues during your first draft. So yes, you can have an outline, but be flexible with it. Make sure that you're allowing yourself a little space to go into a different direction if need be. Don't force yourself to stick to one path just because you feel that's going to finish your story. It took me 5 years to write my first book because I thought you had to outline and you had to follow that outline, and I hated my outline. Once I went off book and I was allowing myself to free write, the first book finished and I was able to write the next one and the next one. My second book took me 6 months to write. 5 years versus 6 months. It makes a huge difference when you allow yourself to reclaim your creativity. Just write the damn book. That, along with first drafts, are supposed to suck. That should be your mantra when it comes to writing your first draft. Get it done. Remember, you can't edit something that isn't written. So whatever is stopping you from writing, find a way to jump around it, to overcome it, so that you're not stopping yourself or taking 5 years to write a book. There's a few secrets that I use when it comes to writing the first draft. Now, the first thing is you want to set aside time. Give yourself space that is just writing time. When we go to work, we clock in, we clock out, we have certain time that we're supposed to be there, we get the job done, right? The same thing applies to writing. If you treat it as something that is important to you and you make time for it, you will do it. Writing takes dedication. So now whether that's setting one day a week, if Sunday is your writing day, you set aside time on Sunday as your writing day. If you write every day of the week, what time are you writing? Make it a routine. For me, I write when my kids go to bed. So I have, during the week, a very hard bedtime at 8 p.m. And that is don't bother mommy time. Once you have been put to bed and been given your kisses, that's it. Mommy doesn't exist right now, it's writing time. And from 8 till midnight, pretty much Monday through Friday, that's my writing time. And I try and dedicate that to my writing work. When you give yourself that time and you make it a routine, you will do it. And that's the important part. You gotta sit down, you gotta write. Focus on making small goals for yourself. Small goals make us feel good. When we achieve a goal, we feel good about it. So give yourself small goals. For me, a small goal would be a writing word count every day. Now, keeping in mind that first drafts are supposed to suck, and I'm going to write just whatever comes to mind without worrying about the structure, the way things look, anything. I call that word spewing. So I have word spewing, 1,000 words a night. That's my goal. They're not going to be good words, I can guarantee you. I'm going to end up revising a lot of them, or cutting a lot of them, but that's my goal every night, 1,000 words a night. Typical novel is between 60,000 and 80,000 words. So if I'm writing 1,000 words every night, I'm going to have that first novel written in 80 days. Seems pretty easy now. That's a really small goal. Only takes 80 days to write that first draft. That's not bad. That's how I can write 3 books a year, because I give myself that goal, and it's an easily achievable goal. So every day I feel good. I met my goal. I did good today. Same thing for you. Now, you don't have to use word count. A lot of people don't like using word count. You can use character development. You can use plot points. You can use a chapter a day as your goal. Whatever is easy for you, make that your goal. And make that your goal for the writing time that you have set for either every day or every weekend, whenever you're actually doing it. Because as you achieve that goal, you feel good. You're ready to do it again. And the more you achieve these small goals, the closer you are to finishing your book. And when you finally have that 80,000 word hot mess first draft manuscript, you are proud as hell because you did it. And now you get to revise it. But you did it. Allow for creativity gaps. This one I struggle with so much. I'm a linear writer. I like to write chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I'm also a pantser. I run into roadblocks. Now when I do, I have to learn how to jump over them, put a pin in it, and come back later. You've got to be flexible. Give yourself the ability to have some creativity gaps. I guarantee you, you will figure out how to bridge those gaps. But if you just stop every time, you can't figure out how to get to the next part, you will not finish. So allow yourself to say, well, chapter 5, I ran into the wall, I don't know what's going on. But I know the characters are going to do this in chapter 7. Okay, jump to chapter 7. Put a pin in it, come back later. Right from chapter 7 on. You might figure out during your writing, oh, now I know how they get there. Hold on, and you can go back and fix chapter 5 and 6. Allow those creativity gaps. Don't let them stop you. I struggle with this every single time I write, so this is one that I even have to remind myself. In fact, my co-host on Spilling Ink, I was talking to her about how I'm just struggling with this book. I don't know what's wrong. I know where the characters are supposed to be. I know how they're supposed to act. I just can't see it right now. And she looks at me and she goes, Katie, what would you tell them? I jumped into the next chapter. She's like, and why don't you listen? Because I'm an idiot who doesn't take my own advice. But there you go. You've got to allow for those creativity gaps. It will help you complete the first story. Silence the editor. Remember, we can't edit something that's not written. So silence the editor during that first draft phase. Allow yourself to have that hot mess of a first draft, because then you have something to edit and revise. You can't edit something that's not there. So shut the editor off. Forget about making it sound perfect. No one's going to read your first draft but you. Even if you have beta readers that help you, they're not going to see that first draft. I don't show anybody my first drafts. They're horrendous. Beta readers tend to see third or fourth drafts before I really show them the good stuff. But yeah, silence the editor. You're going to get through the first draft if you allow yourself to have just the free writing, creativity, and as much of a mess as it's going to look, it'll be fine, as long as you get there. Now, also, this one came from a friend of mine. Prepare your writing space ahead of time. We love to procrastinate. So let's say we set 8 p.m. as our writing time. 8 p.m. comes around, oh, but I need my cup of tea. Oh, but my desk isn't set up. Oh, I can't find my favorite notebook. All of this time that we waste in preparing to write stops us from writing. So if 8 p.m. is your writing time, make sure your tea is ready by 8 p.m. Make sure you have your writing notebooks, your favorite pens, your music, whatever it is that you have to write. Get that set up ahead of time so that 8 p.m., just like you're clocking in for work, you are ready to work and you can utilize your time wisely to finish that night's goal. We're going to do another little writing prompt here. And this time, I want you to just focus on being creative. I want you to silence your editor. I want you to write just whatever comes to mind, in whatever order it comes to mind. And I want you to see if you can get more on the page this time than you did with the last writing prompt. And this is not something we're sharing, so you get to free write and just have fun with it. Okay, time's up. Did we feel better writing the second time than we did on the first go-around? Were you able to let yourself kind of write without worrying about what other people were going to think about it? Or having to worry about sharing it with the rest of the group?
I've been more worried about that sledgehammer.
It's another one of my favorites. Okay, so the point of these exercises is again, to get your creative juices flowing, but to also show you that when you can write without worrying about what other people think of it, you tend to write more. And that's what we want you to do in order to finish that first draft. Get the story on paper. Now, I know we always run into problems while we're writing. I'm currently in the middle of a problem of my own. So there are some problems that we might be able to overcome that won't stop us from finishing that first draft, and we're going to look at those. All of these things, though, aren't really problems. You know what is the problem? Can you guess what it is?
Not writing a book.
Didn't write anything. So let's look at these a little bit deeper. These are the most common things that you'll run into as you're writing. Let's say your outline goes out the window. For you plotters out there, you stick hard to an outline and run it to the wall and don't like your story or don't like it the way that it's moving or your characters won't listen to you, you end up with this problem where your outline tends to be just blown out of the water and you've written in a weird direction and now you don't know where you're going to go with your story. It happens. Be flexible. I want you to get the creative juices flowing again and free write. Find a point where you think the story went off the rails, go back to it, and try and rewrite from there. Look at what's happening. Look at why your characters made the decisions that they made. Were you following your character Bible? Were you making decisions that didn't go along with that, and that's where it went off? Or has your character grown past what you'd originally written? And maybe you need to think about, again, why they're doing these things. Would they really make these actions? Give yourself some time to free write. Open up a new document, right from the point where you messed up, and see if you can make better sense. If it does make more sense, incorporate that into your manuscript. My problem, my favorite one. And it's not really a problem. The skeleton draft. We are told that 60,000 to 80,000 words is a typical novel length. Well, when you're writing a first draft, you may look at that as your goal and you may not hit it. Your story may end before you hit that number. But if you're like me, who writes a skeleton draft, if my skeleton draft was 80,000 words, what comes after would be an epic saga, and that's just not going to happen. So if your first draft is short, it just means you need to add layers. And you're going to add that as you revise, because as you revise, you see more of the world than you originally saw. So don't look at a skeleton draft as a problem. Look at it as an opportunity to put meat on the bones, to add those layers, to reveal more about your world and your characters and how they do things. My skeleton draft may come in at 40,000 words, which is novella length. But my final draft generally comes in at 80,000 words. That's a whole half the novel I haven't actually written in the first draft. That's a whole bunch of layers that need to be added, that will get added. But in the first draft, it's going to come through very, very skinny, very short, most of the time for me, just dialogue. Don't worry about that. It's not actually a problem. It just means that you've gotten the story out in its bare bones form, and now you can add to it. Let's talk about your plot taking a complete wrong turn. Again, you plotters will run into this a lot. We don't want to listen to you. It's okay. Cut from the point where you think you messed up. Don't delete. Never delete. When you're writing, save every bit of words that you're writing, especially in that first draft phase, because you never know where those words could come in handy later. A lot of times I will take it, I will cut it, put it into a new Word document, and save it as error number whatever, or whatever title you want to give it. Don't cut them and delete them, though, because you'll come back later and go, oh, that scene actually would have worked in chapter 7. And then you got it, at least to use later. So find the point where you have the mistake. Cut from there, put it somewhere separate, don't delete it, and then start writing again from that point. Continue forward. Always make sure you're moving forward. Allow yourself a little flexibility. Not everything, even for you plotters, is going to follow the plot. And as a pantser, you're going to go off in a million directions. That's just normal. But don't cut what you've written. Always save your words. And don't delete, not cut, sorry. Don't delete what you've written, because you may find those words come in handy later on in the story, or even in another book, too. I've had scenes that I've written in one book I've cut them, I didn't like them, I saved them. Come to find out later in the series, that interaction between characters actually made more sense. Well, now I've got something that I can call back on, and I may not use that scene exactly, but I may use some of the elements in that scene that's already written and make it work into another story. So don't ever delete them, just cut them, save it somewhere else, move on. This one's a big one. Written from the wrong narrator, wrong point of view. That one is a biggie, and that one is probably the worst one to fix. For that, you're going to have to stay positive. You're going to have to realize that at least you've gotten the story written. You may realize the fatal flaw now, but you haven't published it, so that means you can always fix it. You can always go and move it into a different format as you revise it. Start from the point of view character on your revision. Get the story finished first. Always finish the story. But once you've realized that problem, now you know how to fix it. You've got the story, you've got the bones you need. When you revise it, you have to go through and make all the little changes to fix the right point of view. It's not a dead end, it's just something that's going to take a little work. Yes?
So say you're on your 20,000th word and you realize it's the wrong POV, would you still finish?
It depends. It depends. Are you at the halfway point in your rough draft, or are you...
I'm just hypothetical.
See, for me, it depends on how deep into the story I am. If I'm towards the end of a story, I may just finish it from that point and then go back and revise and do the whole revision again. If I'm still like 20,000 words, still at just the first quarter of the story, I may say, okay, I don't have enough yet to really want to finish the rest. I may restart from there and move forward. So it depends. How far are you into that story? Because 20,000 words isn't a proper gauge yet. But yeah, you want to make sure that you're not stopping yourself from moving forward. That's the key. You want to always make sure that you're getting the story written. Because again, you can't edit what's not there. All right, so it's all plot and no emotion. We talked about plot-driven versus character-driven stories, and the main key point between them is that a plot-driven story gives us the action but not the reason why. So if you're realizing as you're writing that, yeah, I've got this action-packed story, but I'm not feeling it, go back and pick on your characters a little bit. Know them. Look at that character Bible you've been writing. Give yourself more information on the characters. Ask yourself, why did the character do this? Why did they make that choice? If you understand your characters, you will naturally write them from that perspective. But if you don't know your characters and you're realizing this, go back and find out more about them. Interview them. Fill out that character sheet that I gave you guys in the first class. Learn everything about your characters so you can write from the perspective of knowledge. You understand what they're doing, why they're doing, what their motivation is, what their goal for the story is. And also, have their goals changed at all? So learn more about your characters, you will naturally write more. And if you get to that point where you're saying, I do need to invest a little bit more thought in my character's actions, you can. And that comes in the revision phase. You add in the why in the revision phase. How many people out here hate their work? At least once in your writing career, you're going to hate what you write. I don't know an author out there who doesn't have that little demon whispering, you are the worst writer, I don't know why you keep doing this, your story sucks, you suck, you have no talent. Everybody at some point hates their work, and it's okay. Allow yourself to hate your work in the moment. If you truly hate it after you've given it time to breathe, go with a friend, bounce some ideas off each other. See if there's a reason behind the hatred, or if it's just that little demon in the back of your head just telling you suck. Because most of the time it's the little demon telling you that you suck. It's not really that your story sucks. Remember, somebody who was able to make money off of sharks in a tornado. If that can make money, and that's a story people actually like, your story can't be that crazy. So allow yourself the time to hate it. It's okay. We all hate our work at some point. Bounce ideas off of somebody else. Let them read it. Let them see what you've done. They may provide the feedback you need. They may give you a way to make the story sound better. Or they may quell those fears for you and say, it's not that bad, I don't know why you hate it. So that's not really a problem. But we will, again with the fears, it always happens. We always have that little demon in the back of our head. You never get over it, you just learn to deal with it. Is that a question? Okay. Okay, so you can do it, right? Remember, we're going to sit down, we're going to write. We're going to write all the way to the end of our story. We're going to get it out on paper. We're going to move it from the head to the page. We're not going to talk about it ahead of time. because we don't want to create that disconnect that stops us. Can't edit a book that's never written, so don't worry about how it sounds. Remember, first drafts are supposed to suck. Embrace that and allow yourself to write that first draft as a just hot mess. You can always revise it later. Don't let yourself get discouraged. Don't let the demon whisper in your ear and stop you from writing. Writing is hard. If it was easy, everyone would do it. And really, even though it seems like everybody's publishing these days, it's still only a small subset of the population that's actually doing it. The fact that you can get a story from idea to draft to publish, that's awesome. That's not something everybody can do. So give yourself the time, be dedicated, you can do it. Remember to give yourself small goals. Small goals make us feel good. Small goals motivate us. They make us want to do more. We feel good when we hit that first goal, so we're going to do it again and again and again. And when you set yourself that small goal, let's say back again to the writing word count goal, if you look at the story, at 80,000 words is a mountain to climb. It looks impossible at the beginning. But if you look at the story as little 500 to 1,000 steps that you have to hit one at a time, it becomes a lot more manageable. It becomes a lot easier to do. It changes your perspective. So not only do we feel good, but it completely changes the way we look at the mountain we're about to climb. And find your writing community. Find people who are like-minded, that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can run your story against, that you can get feedback from. These are the people that are not only going to give you the feedback you need, but they're going to help motivate you as well. Especially if you're in a writing group and you guys have weekly goals and you can get those weekly goals done. You've got something to show up with at the next meeting. I got a new scene. It makes you feel good. It makes you motivated. It makes you work towards completing that draft. So find those people who are going to help you, and you'll find out that you can do it. You can finish that first draft. Does anybody have any questions? Woo-hoo. All right. Well, that's it for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the 3 parts of this presentation: the storycraft, writing our characters, writing our world building, and now working into getting our ideas done. If on those sheets that you have, if you would like me to do one on plot, which I'm actually working on right now, I've got a very in-depth set of notes right now on plot structure. Put that on there so that the library can bring you back in and do one on plot, because I really do want to dive into that. And if you have any questions, come on up and ask them.
Do you have any more of these that handouts for today's presentation?
There was 2 that are a little bit.
Oh, awesome, they found me one.
Okay,
Thank
so there's a
you.
couple over here that look like they got mangled with a stapler. So there are 2 extras.
Oh, no.
And if anybody's missing some of the ones from previous weeks, email me, grab my card up at the front there, and email me and let me know, and I can send you the PDF on that. Yes?
There's a
Do
couple
you know
over
a
here.
good reference that talks about the structure of the hero's journey?
Go on YouTube, look up Brandon Sanderson. He has a workshop series that is, I think they're hour-long chunks. And look up his one, I think it's called The Box. And he does the hero's journey, he does the rags to riches, and there's another one, I can't remember what it is. But he outlines the 3 different types of plot structures and how they kind of fit together, the different beats with them. And it's really informative.
Thank you.
Any suggestions for how to go about starting a writing group?
That one's really hard. It's better to join one that's already active to find people, unless you've got a group of people you already know that will be able to meet at certain times. And that's the problem, is getting people to meet at the right time. If you know people, you can set up your own. If not, I believe there is one that's the Las Vegas Romance Writers has a group. The Henderson Writers have a group that meets every, I want to say, Monday at the Faith Lutheran Church. I want to say it's on Sand Hill and Tropicana. And I believe they meet every Monday. So there are some that are already active out there. And you can search Facebook for Las Vegas writer groups. I know there's a few online groups. But those are the 2 I know specifically.
And how often do you think, what have you found successful about the meeting, how often?
It really depends on what your goal is. If you're going because you want to have that weekly, motivation, then I would say, yeah, go every single week and get that as your motivation to help write your stories. Because I know with the Henderson Writers Group, they have time set every meeting for people people to stand up and read what they've written and give feedback. And I think that can be incredibly motivating. But some people get intimidated by that, so it's kind of up to you, to your level of motivation. You can also join online groups. When I first started, I went through Critique Circle. And that's a website which you post a chapter and people either critique it or just read it and provide like a 5-star review or whatever on it. But in order for you to get reviews, you also have to review others. So as many reviews as you want for that week's posting, you have to review that many as well. So it kind of forces you to do the same thing in an online format.
And you said you did that?
I did,
you find
I did.
feedback was helpful?
I did. It was interesting because everybody provides different levels of feedback. So some people will focus more on word structure, sentence structure. Some people focus more on character development. And so you get a broad range of feedback that you kind of wade through and figure out, okay, is this helpful in my story? Will this make my story better? And because it's online, it's more anonymous, so it's less of that fear of being in public and speaking. So it worked for me to do it that way. Yes?
And then also befriend authors if you can on Facebook.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Because
definitely.
you can pick their brain, like I pick Katie's brain all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I always welcome people to friend me on Facebook. I live on Facebook, actually. And I'll answer questions. I run Spilling Ink, which is every week we interview authors and we talk about their journeys and we talk about what's helped them and get writing advice and things like that. So sometimes watching those podcasts can help too. But remember, like I said at the beginning, watching podcasts and stuff or listening to those doesn't write your book. You still have to do the hard work. Yes?
Is Spilling Ink on YouTube? or-
It is. It's on YouTube and it's on Facebook. So for instance, tonight when I get home, I've got a show at 5 p.m. So we'll be on Facebook tonight at 5 p.m. and then we'll move that show over to YouTube afterwards. And it will be a live chat. So you can jump in and ask questions as an audience member. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you guys for showing up.
Thank you,
You want to? Okay, you can if you'd like.
I can do it later. It's
Come on up,
5:15.
come on up.
Okay.
See, I was doing that more of a psychological. I
I
wanted
was just
that
wondering if you were going to
curiosity.
have us do it. I wanted to hear
If
everybody
you
wrote.
want to, absolutely, jump on up here.
Leaving the Paseo Library, running to the car because of the unusual cold weather for mid-February, actually 2 days after the snow, I get to the place where I left my car. But it can't be my car. I didn't leave the window open. But I look further and see it's got my license plate, my stickers. Did someone break my Pride and Joy's window? Wait, there's something moving inside. It's not a dog or a cat. It's got a weird shaped head. No, it can't be. But it sure looks like a small dragon. It's shielding itself in the corner furthest away from the broken window, where there's still some warmth left in the car from earlier. It sees me. It shies away as if scared. I don't know if it's aggressive or tame or what, but it just looks at me, wondering, scared. And that's where 5 minutes in.
Very good. I like that, and I like the fact that you use questions to build your story. And that's exactly what we talked about in world building. Asking questions and providing answers is how you get the creativity to work. So absolutely good job, bravo. Anybody else want to share theirs? Awesome.
I pushed my shopping cart to where I'd parked, expecting to find the blue hatchback I'd left there earlier. In its place, looking at me with eager eyes, was Maud. Her sapphire scales shone, an iridescence moving across as she breathed. I thought we talked about this, I said. She blinked and tilted her head to one side. You can't leave that there, yelled someone hidden behind a car 3 spaces to my left. Maud narrowed her gaze at the car in question and began a lazy stretch. The crumpled hood of my car now visible under her belly. How am I supposed to get groceries home now, I asked. She chuffed, then snorted fire at the car, setting it ablaze.
That's awesome. I love it. And I like your necklace too. That's really pretty. See, I like that. The creativity is working. You've got some great story, great fodder for a new story should you want to write it. Anybody else want to share? Come on. And again, this is why writing groups are really good, because you will do that and you'll get that encouragement as well as feedback. So yeah, definitely Writing groups are here. Go for it.
So finally done with the seminar. I'm so excited to go home and play my new Nintendo Switch, but what? This can't be real. There's a dragon on top of my car. But not just any dragon. It's a stuffed dragon. How did he get there? Well, I couldn't just leave him on top of the car, so I took him home. And he looked kind of expensive, not just a kid's toy. So I set him on the dresser, and I forgot about him, hoping that the dogs didn't eat him. So why am I standing outside of my house as I watch it burn? As I know the only thing that will be left standing is that godforsaken toy dragon. And I can't just leave it for someone else to find. So I wait the fire out, and I grab the toy, and off I go to find out what is happening and how to stop it. Very nice.
I like that. Have you seen that meme where it said how to determine a dragon in disguise, and it's got the cat sitting on the crumpled hood? I love it. That's what I was thinking as you were reading your story. I'm thinking of the little stuffed dragon just crumpling everything. I love it. Anybody else want to share? Come on up.
I walked to my car's parking place, but could not find it. I pushed my key button, but there was no more. Only a tiny squeak. I look again more carefully. I spotted a small gecko where my car was. It was doing push-ups on the concrete. I stooped down on one knee to communicate with the gecko. It made a loud squeak this time. I sat down beside it. It crawled between my legs and stood up as if to say something. I said, "Hello, little dragon." Hello, little dragon.
Oh,
Anybody else?
I think I should get up because I'm nervous.
Oh, don't get nervous.
I have to get over my
I like how
fear.
every story is so different. We all see things in a different way.
After leaving my writer's workshop filled with wonderful ideas about plots and character development, I stumbled upon a dragon laying where my old car used to be. She was iridescent in color, a shimmering rainbow against the sun. And I found her to be beautiful and just a bit frightening. But her eyes looked kind, and I figured I could ask her what happened to my car. The drive home was not an easy walk. I slowly approached and timidly asked her if she had seen my car or knew what happened to it. Her eyes were a goldish color, and she stated in a voice that she was in fact my car. I was astonished. How could this be? I shouted. My mind reeled from this new revelation. The dragon said, "Magic."
Very, very good. And again, I like how everybody's got a different way to view it. Even though you all got the same prompt to start with, everyone's story is unique to them. So very good. Anybody else before we go? Yeah, come on.
My front door is a portal to anywhere I want to go. Now on the surface, you may think that is really cool. I'm sure many of you are already thinking of where you would want to go if given the opportunity. The beach, the mountains, Disneyland. But you know what they say, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is, or something like that. So yes, my door is a magical portal that takes you anywhere you want to go. But how do you get back? That is the catch. It will take you anywhere, and I do mean anywhere.
Very nice. I love the twist there, but it won't take you back. Ooh. Where could you get stranded? See, there's a whole story you started right there. I love it. Anybody else?
I'll do my folder story.
Go for it. Yes, please.
first time I went to the Nether, I was 8. It was an otherwise normal morning. Cocoa Pops breakfast, school uniform fresh from the dryer, kids from mum as I ran to the front door. I was running late because I couldn't find my maths book. Somehow it was under the sofa cushions. And I didn't waste any time when I pulled open the door and ran through into the blinding morning light. Except it wasn't my morning light. The sky lit up with veins of lightning, bright white fingers pointing to nowhere. The door slammed shut behind me and I spun, but only saw a more open, desolate landscape.
Excellent job. All right, if you guys are done, you're free to go. Just beware of going through the door.
Yeah.
Never